Think back just a couple of years. It really felt like COVID was the only thing happening in the entire world, didn't it? It was in every conversation, every single headline. It shaped every decision we made. And then it's like it just stopped. The constant roar just faded away. So let's get into it. This is a real modern mystery. Where on earth did COVID go? I mean, the shift has been absolutely staggering. We went from watching daily press briefings, seeing these eerily empty city streets, to a world that honestly looks a whole lot like it did before the pandemic. Lockdown life was traded for sold-out concerts and airports that are just completely jammed. It's such a dramatic change, it almost feels like we all just woke up from some kind of bizarre collective dream. And that brings us right back to the big question. If the virus is definitely still out there, why does it feel like it totally vanished from our lives, from our day-to-day conversations? Well, the answer isn't simple. It's not just one thing. It's actually a fascinating mix of biology, our own psychology, and how society works. All right, so our investigation is going to start with the first and maybe the biggest clue. And here's the twist. It's not actually about the virus itself. It's about a massive foundational change that happened inside of us. Here's the core truth, the big biological takeaway, right up front. The virus, SARS-CoV-2, it didn't just pack up its bags and leave town. No, we are the ones who changed. As a species, our relationship with this thing was fundamentally altered. So how did we change the game? Well, it really comes down to two major things. First, widespread immunity. Between all the vaccines, the boosters, and just the sheer number of people who got infected, our bodies learned how to fight back. Now, this didn't stop people from getting it, but, and this is absolutely crucial, it disconnected infection from severe illness for most of us. And second, our doctors just got way, way better at treating it. They went from figuring things out on the fly to having a whole toolkit of antivirals and proven treatment plans. It basically transformed COVID from this terrifying unknown into a much more manageable illness. Okay, so with that immediate biological threat dialed way down, the next piece of this puzzle started falling into place. And this one happened inside our heads. We went through this massive psychological shift, both as individuals and just as a whole society. This quote from The Guardian, it just nails it. The pandemic was, without a doubt, a long collective trauma. And what usually follows a trauma? Well, pretty often, it's this powerful collective urge to just forget, to put it behind us and move on. We couldn't keep living in that constant state of high alert, so our minds started doing the work of moving on, even if the virus hadn't. And our perception was also being shaped by this incredibly powerful force, the news cycle. I mean, for a couple of years, COVID was pretty much the only story that mattered. But we all got fatigued. We just couldn't take any more of the bad news day in and day out. Then, new crises started to emerge, and naturally, the media spotlight shifted. And you know what happens then? When we stopped seeing it and hearing about it every single day, we started to feel like it was gone. And this leads to this really key concept called risk normalization. Just think about it for a second. We accept all kinds of risks every day without even thinking about it, like getting in a car. Well, eventually society just got tired. We were exhausted by the constant vigilance. We hit a point where we, as a group, kind of decided to accept COVID as just another risk of living, instead of this huge crisis we had to avoid at all costs. We wanted our lives back. Okay, so we have the biological clues and we have the psychological clues. So now let's put them together for the big reveal. What we're actually witnessing is what some experts call the pandemic's social death. Now, to really get this, we have to know the difference between a pandemic and an endemic disease. A pandemic is like a wildfire, an explosive, overwhelming crisis. But an endemic disease, that's one that has settled in for the long haul. It's still here, it's still circulating, but at more predictable, manageable levels. It often follows seasonal patterns, kind of like the flu. So COVID didn't vanish, it settled. It became endemic. And here is the most crucial point of all. A pandemic really has two endings. First, there's the medical ending. That's when the cases and the deaths fall dramatically. But then there's the social ending. And according to historian Dr. Jeremy Green, that's when the public's fear finally goes away, and we, as a society, just collectively decide to get on with life. That is exactly what we are living through right now. But, and this is a really important but, this social ending is not the whole story. And it certainly hasn't been the same experience for everyone. For millions of people, this chapter is still very, very far from over. For people who are immunocompromised, for the elderly, for anyone with underlying health conditions, that threat is still incredibly real. As the rest of society decided to move on, their vulnerability didn't just disappear. And of course, we absolutely cannot forget the millions of people around the world who are living with long COVID, whose lives are still deeply, deeply impacted by symptoms that can linger for months or even years. For them, the pandemic is still a daily reality. So, in the end, where did COVID go? It didn't go anywhere. It just faded into the background of our lives. It stopped being an all-consuming crisis that demanded our constant attention. We didn't defeat it in some big, final battle. The silence that we hear around COVID today, well, it's not the sound of victory. It's the sound of us adapting,